Today's daf is daf Pei Zayin, and on daf Pei Vavam and Beis, the Gemara had presented the view of Rabbi Yochanan. We're talking about multiple Megarshim, many people who are being Megarish, each one respectively their own wife, but on one get, and the Edom are signed on the bottom of the get. And the differentiation is between what's called Klal and Tofes. In the case of Klal, we integrate all the different Gerushin stories in this daf into one entity, one get, and therefore the signature of the Edom on the bottom relates to the entire get. And you can use this one document to divorce Reuven, his wife, Shimon, his wife, etc., etc. However, in a case of Tofes, then only the bottom story of Gerushin is valid as a get because the Eidim are signed only on that last get. And the Gemara presented the view of Rabbi Yochanan, according to which the difference between Klal and Prat is in the Zman. If there's one Zman on top for all the different stories of all the different Megarshim and Mesgarshos, then it's one Klal. It's integrated into one get, and the Edus is Chal on all the various stories, all the Gerushin. If, however, there's a separate Zman for each one of the stories of Gerushin, that's called Tofes, and therefore the Eidim are only signed on the bottom story. And it's only valid for that get. And now we're up to the Shita of Reish Lakish here on the bottom, on the top of a Zayin Bez. Afilu Zman Echad L'Kulam. It's not enough, says Reish Lakish, that there's one Zman on top for all the different stories. That still is called Tofes. And Nami Havi Tofes, and therefore the Edus is only Chal on the bottom story. Each get is a separate get, although it's on one document and one piece of paper, but nevertheless there are separate stories and a Spiris Dvarim for Reuven to Rachel, Shimon to Leah, etc., and that sets it up as separate Gittin, and the Edom on the bottom are only signed on the last bottom get. However, Hechidomi Klal, the cause of Anu Ploni Uploni Gerashnu Shosenu Plonis Uplonis. There's got to be one Spheris Dvarim, one story, and that allows you to integrate all the various Gittin into one entity, such that the Edom signed on the bottom, their signature is Chal on the entire get. Maskifla Rabbi Abba Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Abba raises the following objection to Rabbi Yochanan. The Omer Zman Echad L'Kulam Zeklal, that according to Rabbi Yochanan, just because there's one Zman on the top, that integrates all the stories, each story separately into one get. Lechesh Dilma Ki Chasmu Sahadi Abbasahu De Chasimi. Okay, very nice. It's one Zman, and the Zman was not repeated over and over again in the get, but nevertheless, the Edom only signed on the bottom of the get. Maybe their signature was only attached and their testimony to the bottom Gerushin. Milo Tanya, didn't we have a brisa? Edom chasumim al sheila shalom beget, posel chayshin shema al sheila sashalom chasmu. If after the get, on the bottom of the get, they added she'ela shalom, they said sha'alu b'shlomo shel ploni, do me a favor, pass on my best wishes to so-and-so, possible. Then we assume the Eidim are only signed on the bottom, which is the Sheila Shalom. So we don't relate the signature of the Eidim to the entire story that came in the get. And here too, we should always say that maybe the Eidim are only signed on the bottom story of the get. And the Gemara answers, Lavit Mar Allah Rabbi Abo. We have, based on this question, an interpretation of Rabbi Yochanan coming from Rabbi Avo. L'didi mefarshin oli mine de Rabbi Yochanan. I have a tradition how to interpret Rabbi Yochanan, and that is that sha'alu pasal v'sha'alu kosher. Everything depends upon the conjunction of vav. If there's no vav, and you start with the word sha'alu, not visha'alu, but sha'alu, that begins a new section, and the Edom are only signed on that section. But if it says Vishalu, it means in addition to the get, also do me a favor and send regards to so-and-so. The Vav then combines and integrates what came before the Vav to what came after the Vav, and the Edom are now signed on everything together, and the get is kosher. Nami here too. When did Rabbi Yochanan say that there's a klal, that if there's one Zman, it integrates the entire story of the Edus? That's the Kosove, Ploni, Uploni, Uploni. Every time he adds a Vav, and the Vav, which is called the Vav HaMachaber, indicates that all of this is integrated into one whole, and therefore, even though there are many, many different spheres dvarims for each Megarish, but nevertheless, it's all integrated into one entity and one get based on the Vav. We're asked another kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. V'sul Rabbi Yochanan di Amar Zmano Zman l'chol echad zeu tofes. If each one of the stories, each one of the zugot has its own zman, then it's going to do tofes, and the Edom are only signing on the bottom, and that's the only part of the get that's kosher. My area mishum tofes. Why did the Mishnah say that the get is possible because of tofes, which means that we separate each one of the stories and the zugot into a separate entity and a separate get? Forget about all that. Typically, I have another reason why the get is possible. What does that mean? You have different zmanim written in the get. Each zman is related, respectively, to one of the other spheres, or one of the other zugos. And then we should assume that the zman up on top is the day before the Edom signed on the bottom. That makes it into a get mukdam. And a get mukdam is possible. So forget about the fact that it's a tofes, because there are many, many zmanim written in the get. Leave that out. Even without the concept of tofes, the get would be possible because it's a get mukdam, i.e., the signatures are written on the later date vis-a-vis the time of the writing of the get. And the Gemara says, Omar le Markshisha Breder Rav Chizda Rav Ash Hachi Aminu B'Shmei Rav Yochanan Tichsiv Behu Bechad B'Shabsa Bechad B'Shabsa. Each one of the zmanim is the same identical zman. It was written on a Sunday, and therefore the first Gittin would not be possible because of the Chsimas Edim, because everything was written on the same day. And now the Gemara is going to turn around and ask a kasha on Reish Lakish. I just want to read one note here. Yeah, okay, no, the note supports what we said. Amalei Ravina Ravashi, the Reish Lakish, the Omar. Zman echel nami tofes havi. It's not enough that there's one zman on the get, but rather you have to integrate the spheres dvarim and say that ploni are being megarish plonis and plonis echidomi klal because of beachi anu ploni garash the same plonis and plonis nitzu shtei nashim is garshas begecha vatorah amra v'kasav la v'lo la v'charata. You need a separate get for each gerushin, and here you have one get that's integrated by the spheres dvarim of anu ploni, etc., and yet they're divorcing two wives with one get. The Torah says la v'lo lechavert. More answers the hadar kasav ploni gerish plonis uploni gerish ploni. Enochinam. Reish Lakish would not allow for the hechsher of the get for all of these megarshim and misgarshos, simply because you integrated the spheres dvarim. That would be a problem of law v'lo l'chavrata, one get for multiple divorces. But rather what happens is that in this case, the sofer added a line at the end of the get, and he says, ploni gerish plonis, uploni gerish plonis. So what happens now is that this bottom nusach that was added to the get by the sofer is going to be effective to make this into a separate get for each one of the ladies. So on the one hand, very paradoxically, it's one get, and on the other hand, it's multiple gittin. It's one get in terms of the chasimas ha'edim, because they were signed on the Sfiras Dvara, which integrated all the different zugot. On the other hand, there are separate gittin here, and therefore it's not a problem of love, because at the end of the get, they separated the various zugot. Ploni gerish plonis, uploni gerish plonis. So Reish Lakish's story is very complex. Why is the law of this get that at the end of the get you have to write a separate indication of gerushin for each woman? Why is it different from the following brisa? We have an equation, what's called la isha le'eved ivri, eved kanani, excuse me, and that's a gemara that we had back on Daf Lamed Tes Amid Beis, in which we compare shechure avodim with Gzeir Shavuot to Gittin Nashim. And with regard to shechure avodim, the brisa says, "Hakosed kol nechasav l'shnei avodim." A man wrote kol nechasai leploni uploni avdi, and there were two avodim. So he's basically dividing up his estate in half. Each one of the avodim, respectively, will receive a gift of half of the estate. Is kanu. Now, what does it mean, kanu? It means that each eved now acquires ownership on half the estate, and within half the estate is half of the other eved. Is mishachrim zed zed. Each one of the two avodim now has to be mishachar the other half of the other eved. But in any event, this shtar is considered a valid shtar shichur shel avodim, even though it's written to two avodim biyachat. He never separated the two avodim. And since we have an equation between shechure avodim and gittin nashim, we should say the same thing. Then in gittin nashim, we should allow for one get to be chal for multiple nashim. So why, excuse me, why is it necessary to say that the sofer added at the end of the get, ploni gerash plonis, uploni plonis? And the Gemara answers, v'lavu kimna b'shnei shtaros. That back on the Gemara on Daf Mem Beis, we already interpreted that this case of the price of Kosef Kol Nechas Shnei Avodim is a case where there were two separate shtaros, each one respectively delivered to each one of the two avodim. And although he was makna both of them together, but nevertheless each shtar had its own shtar, l'shem eved echad, and therefore if it was written only for the sake of one eved, and so too in Gittin Nashim, you need a shtar, a get that's written only for the sake of one isha. Tanya kavos Rabbi Yochanan, Tanya kavos Reish Lakish, Tanya kavos Rabbi Yochanan. Chamisha shekasu v'toch haget ish ploni megarish plonis uploni plonis uploni plonis. So they were separate spheres and varim, but v'zman echad lekulam, there's one zman on top. V'edim l'mata kulam ksherim v'tinasu kolachas v'yachas. Why is that? Because Rabbi Yochanan shita that one zman integrates all the separate spheres dvarim into one get. Zman l'kol echad v'yachad. However, says the brisa, if each one of the zugos has its own zman in the get, and even though, as we said before, it's always the same zman of chad v'shavsa, v'ha'edim ilamata, eshedim nikrayim kosher. Only the last zug has a kosher get because the zmanim are mafsikim, and they set it up as independent gerushin. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, even in the case of the Sefer, where there's this man l'kolecha v'echad, in yesh revach beineim, between each zug there's empty space, possible. the get is separated into and broken down into various segments and various gittin for each zug separately because of the revach hamafsik, but if there's no revach hamafsik, kosher. Even though there's a separate zman for each spheres tvarim of each zug, nevertheless, if there was no revach and you read the get flowingly, continuously, without separating it, is ein hazman mafsika. Zman itself does not set up a hefsek and break it into various gittin. What we need is revach. So this supports the shita of Rabbi Yochanan, that quite clearly from this brisa we understand that even though there are multiple spheres tvarim, but there's one zman, the zman integrates all the gittin into one. Tanya kavos Reish Lakish, but here we have a brisa to support Reish Lakish chamisha kosvu klal b'toch haget. And what is a klal? Not like the previous brisa which says ish ploni megarish plonis, ploni plonis, but rather anu, we together, ploni uploni gerashnu shoseim plonis uplonis, ploni gerish plonis uploni gerish plonis. Again, we need that chasima on the bottom in order to make sure that it's not one get for two women. Uzman echad lekulam. So we have one zman, so there's no hefsek in zman, and there's a sphere svarim that integrated all the zugos. Hedin lamata kulam ksherim v'tinosan kol achas v'yachas. So this is a black and white support for Reish Lakish, that all we need is to integrate the spheres tvarim. There's one zman, there's no hefsek, and then and only then is it called a klal, and the signature on the bottom is chal on the entire get. However, zman l'kol echad v'yechad, v'revach l'kol echad v'yechad, either if there is a separate zman, because this brisa does not accept the shita Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira that you need a revach, but even zman, like we saw earlier, is a hefsek, or alternatively, revach is a hefsek. So you have two possible hefsekos, edim lamata, es edim nikarim. Imo, only the bottom sphere is tvarim with the zug on the bottom is kosher. The Ritva says that since he mixed them all together, and he wrote ani ploni uploni at the beginning of the get, therefore the chasimos are chal with regard to all the gittin. But if there's a revach, and even zman as a separate zman is considered like a revach, then we break up the gittin into multiple gittin, and the chasimos could only be valid for the bottom get. Rabbi Meir Omer Afal Pishain Revach Beineim Pasul Sharei Zman Mafsika. And Rabbi Meir is adding that if there's a continuous get without any revach, but there's a zman between them, the zman itself is mafsik. So Gemara now raises the following kasha: Ula Reish Lakish, my area zman l'kol echad v'echad. According to Reish Lakish, that even a get that has one zman for all the different zugos, nevertheless, if he separates the spheres tvarim for each zug, then the get is going to only be kosher for the bottom. Is my area? Why does the brisa mention zman l'kol echad v'echad? That the reason why the get is possible is because we separated them. Ha'omar, didn't Reish Lakish say that even if there's zman echad l'kulam nami tofisave, the Adam sign on the bottom get and only on this bottom get, and the get is possible as far as the Zugas Elyonim are concerned, so the brisa shouldn't have had to mention Zman l'kol echad v'echad. Just simply the fact that it is a tofes, meaning that each zug was mentioned separately, right? That itself should be a posel. And the Gemara says, Hani Mili, when do we say that even one Zman l'kulam is still possible? Because the sphere starting was separated. Ano ploni uploni. He didn't say ano ploni uploni. But if he had said in the beginning of the get ano ploni uploni, then he polagluhu bisman only if the get is separated into various parts by the Zman that's written for each one of the Zugos, then the get is possible. But if he didn't write a separate Zman and he had integrated the spheres Dvarim into one entity of Anu, Ploni, Ploni, Girashnish, Sosayim, the get is not possible. And that's because it's one entity of a get. That's Reish Lakish's opinion. That's why the Brisa says Zman l'kol echad v'echad, because the Zman echad l'kulam would mean that the get is not possible, but as long as we fulfill the other condition, namely that it was irvinu meikara and it was anu ploni uplon. And this leads us to the Mishnah. Now, the Mishnah and the balance of today's daf is going to deal with various scenarios in which the signatures of the Eidim on the get are and leave us wondering. So, for example, the Jews who lived in Yavan had a very strange minhag. At least it's strange to our ears. And what happens is that instead of like our minhag, where Yosef ben Shimon means that my name is Yosef, my father's name was Shimon, it goes just the reverse. And Yosef ben, and then Shimon, means that my name is Shimon, and I am called Yosef ben, meaning I am the son of Yosef. So they begin the name or the signature with their father's name. So Shnei Gittin sheksavam zeh bezad zeh. You have two Gittin that are written on two sides of the shtar. On the right side is one story about Reuven and Leah, and another on the left side is a story about Shimon and Rachel. And what happens now? Shnei Eidim Ivrim ba mitachas zeh l'tachas zeh. When a person signed as an Ivri, meaning the regular Yosef ben Shimon, his name is Yosef, his father's name was Shimon, he stretched it across both Gittin. So let's say this Masechet gives you a little bit of a tavla, and in his tavla he's got Reuven ben Yaakov, 8. So we'll go with his tavla so we don't get confused. So you have a nusach of a get on the right side, you have a nusach of a get on the left side, and Reuven ben Yaakov signed as the first aid with his personal name on the right side, underneath the right get, and his father's name, Ben Yaakov, on the left side. But we're going to see that he made one mistake. He didn't write Reuven on one side and then Ben Yaakov on the other side, because we're going to see that Ben Yaakov is actually a valid signature. But rather he wrote Reuven Ben on the right side and Yaakov on the left side. So Yaakov is his father's name. That's not going to be a signature. Now we have another case. Shnayim Eidim Yevonim. Okay, these are Greek Jews, and they sign based on the minhag that their first name comes last. And boim mitachas zeh l'tachas zeh. Okay, so you have 4 signatures on this get. You've got 2 Jewish signatures. I don't mean Jewish, but I mean to say the regular classic signatures. So you have Reuven ben under the right get, Yaakov under the left get. You've got Shimon ben on the right side and Levi on the left side. So that's called Shnei Eidim Ivrim. And then underneath them, you have 2 more signatures, but they're written by Yevonim. So we'll call it Yehuda ben and Yisachar. So his name is Yisachar. Or Shmuel ben Yechezkel. So his name is Yechezkel. His father's name is Yehuda ben or Shmuel ben. So what's the din in this case? The get which has underneath it two Eidim, right? It's got Reuven and Shimon. Even though we're cutting out the names of their fathers, because Yaakov and Levi are on the left side, nevertheless, the get is kosher. But again, which get is kosher? Only the right get. Now we go on to a case where both Gittin will be psulim. Oh, by the way, let's just add one more important point here. Let's say instead of the Ivrim signing first as the first two signatures, and then the Yevonim as the second, the third and fourth signatures, let's just switch it around. Let's say that the Yevonim signed on top. They were the first two signatures. So then their name is on the left side of the get, right? Because Yehuda ben means that my father's name is Yehuda. Yisachar means that my name is Yisachar, and the name Yisachar appears on the left side of the get. So the left get would be kosher in this case, and not the right get. And we're always looking at the signatures that are closest to the get. So that if the Ivrim signed first, Reuven and Shimon, without their father's name, the right get is kosher. If Yehuda and Shmuel, the Yevonim, signed first, then their signatures will be valid, but only for the left get, because their names appear on the left side. Mishnah continues. Eid Echad Ivri. So one Eid signed first, and he's an Ivri. And his first name, therefore, is on the right side. That's called Reuven ben, and then Yaakov on the left side. And Eid Echad Yevon. Immediately below the Eid Ivri, we have an Eid Echad Yevon. And can we integrate these two signatures to form a pair of Eidim? And the answer is no, we cannot do so. Because the Eid Echad Yevoni's first name is on the left side, whereas the Eid Echad Ivri's signature is on the right side. So those two don't integrate. The Eid Echad Ivri. So if the third signature would be the Eid Echad Ivri, and now the Eid Echad Ivri, his name will appear on the left side of the get, and afterwards Eid Echad Yevoni, and the name of his father is on the right side of the get, is Bo'in mitachas zeh l'tachas zeh, and the chasimos start on one side, on the right side, and continue into the left side. So the first Eid and the second Eid have their names under the get Yemini, and their father's name under the left. Ha'Eid hashlishi b'ri chosmu shmam tachas haget smoli v'shem aviyim tachas hayemini shneim psulim. So he's got a picture here, a diagram of what happened here in the Seifa of the Mishnah, which case both Gittin up psulim. He's got number one, a signature of an Ivri, that's Reuven ben Yaakov. So on the right side, there's a very fine signature of Reuven. And now the Yevoni takes over, and the second signature is that of the Yevoni. And he signs Yosef ben Shimon, and he picks it up below the first signature. Now keep in mind that the first signature of Reuven ben Yaakov left Yaakov on the left side. So the Yevoni now is going to sign his name Yosef, which really is his father's name, on the left side below him, and Ben Shimon, which indicates his own name, on the right side. So there's no way that we can integrate the first signature of the Ivri with the second signature below it of the Yevoni, because between them we have the name Yosef. Now we go on, and the third signature is in Ivri. He picks up where the second signature left off, and he writes his name Kahas on the left side, and Ben Levi on the right side. And then the Yevani writes Yechezkel ben Naphtali, and his name is Naphtali. But in between, you got the Ben Levi, so you can't integrate the third and the fourth signatures. The Gemara says that in the Mishnah later on, Adaf Pei Zayin Amid Beis, we have three ways in which an aid could sign, and they're all three valid. He could either sign with his first name Ruvain Aid, he could sign with his father's name Ben Yaakov Aid, or he could write Ruvain Ben Yaakov and leave out the word Aid. So the Gemara asks the following kasha. In the first case in the Mishnah, when you have two Eidim Ivrim signed below, and you've got two Eidim Yevanim signed third and fourth, so the Gemara says, "V'liskasher hai b'Reuven v'hai b'ben Yaakov Eid." Why can't we accept and validate the left get based on the fact that he's mentioning his father's name? We said that one of the three valid ways of signing is through the name of your father, so that therefore the get on the left side has let's say in the Havmin of the Gemara it has Ben Yaakov Eid, and below that you have Ben Levi Eid. So those two are valid signatures. We should be able to match not only the right get but also the left get. Dosnan Ben Ish Ploni Eid Kosher. As long as he says his father's name, that's enough to validate a signature. And the Gemara answers the cause of Ruvain ben Akama. He made a mistake, as we indicated earlier, and he added the word ben to the right signature. Had he written only Ruvain, and then on the left, below the left get, he had written Ben Yaakov, then Enochinami, Ben Yaakov would be a valid signature, and the left get likewise would be valid. But he made a boo-boo, and all he wrote onto the left get was Yaakov. He didn't write Ben Yaakov, he wrote Yaakov. And Yaakov is not an aid, because we know that it was signed by Ruvain, and not by Yaakov. So the Gemara says, V'liskasher hai beruvain ben, V'liskasher hai, why can't we be machshir the left get the Yaakov aid? Of course, one of the three valid ways of being machshir get is when you write Yaakov aid. Dasnan, because the Mishnah later on says that if he has Ish Ploni aid, so now the Gemara in the Havamim is assuming that Ruvain signed on the right side and Yaakov, a different person, signed on the left side. And that would be kosher midin Ish Ploni aid kosher. Gemara answers, to lo kosav, he didn't add the word aid. Right? If you only write your first name, then that's only going to be kosher if you add the word aid. Or if you write your father's name, it's only kosher if you add the word aid. Here he omitted the word aid. And therefore, Yaakov is not a valid signature. You have to write Yaakov aid. Okay, I'll grant you that he wrote Yaakov aid. But the Adinim Ha'echsim, the Lav Yaakov, who we recognize his signature as being that of Ruvain. Ruvain wrote Ruvain ben Yaakov aid. And it's not the signature of Yaakov. So Yaakov cannot be a kosher aid to be machshir the left get.